What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have Tropical Storm Kirk rapidly organizing and preparing to intensify at a very quick rate out in the Atlantic Ocean. We have Joyce and Isaac that are becoming tropical depressions and post-tropical cyclones out there, and we have another area of interest behind Kirk that is continuing to quickly organize and develop, and we have this Caribbean area of interest that we're still paying attention to, but the probability of development has gone down in the long term, so we're going to have to pay attention to that and look at the conditions and see how everything will pan out. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. So here's the situation that we have right here. We have Tropical Storm Kirk, which now has 50-mile-per-hour winds and a pressure of 1,001 millibars. We have this area of interest out here in the eastern tropical Atlantic. We have this area of interest out here in the Caribbean Sea. Right here. Right, so let's go ahead and start with this area of interest right here, give a quick overview, and then we'll get to Kirk. So let's go ahead and start. A trough of low pressure located over the southwestern Caribbean Sea continues to produce some disorganized shower and thunderstorm activity. Environmental conditions could become conducive for gradual development, and a tropical depression could form in a few days while the system is over the southern Gulf of Mexico or northwestern Caribbean Sea. Interests along the U.S. Gulf Coast should monitor the progress of the system. So we have a 10% and 40% probability in the next 48 hours and 7 days, respectively. So that's stuff we're going to have to pay attention to, but we're going to have to watch the models as well because we have seen a bit more of iffiness in terms of if this thing develops or not, which if it doesn't, that'll be the best possible news that we can get because of what's going on in North Carolina, Georgia, and South Carolina with Hurricane Helene right now, which, by the way, we do have some news in regards to that, at least in terms of at least indirect news. Dr. Levi Cowan posted this on Twitter, and this is the reason we're not getting tropical tidbit satellite imagery like we would normally show you here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. Website notice, the GOES satellite imagery remains unavailable because the public data feed from the NOAA has been down since Friday, seemingly due to the impacts of Hurricane Helene. Tropical Tidbits is not the only imagery provider dependent on this data. I don't know of an estimated time for restoration, but given the tragedy occurring in the southern Appalachians, I don't intend to complain. Don't blame you either. In the meantime, NASA provides a good source of GOES imagery that I've been using since childhood, and he provides the link to that right there. We're also using that as well in this video right here. This is the satellite imagery we're going to be using going forward until Tropical Tidbits is back online. Regardless of that, I am curious to see where excuse me. I'm curious to see where the servers are for this are. I'm not sure. I've heard some people say that they're in Asheville. I can't 100% confirm or deny that because I haven't looked into it too much because I've had my own stuff going on. But regardless, we'll pay attention to it. Next thing we're going to go ahead and talk about right here is Tropical Storm Kirk. Kirk has been pretty interesting to take a look at because of how quickly this system is organizing and how quickly it's developing. So let's go ahead and go to the public advisory. Right here at 11 a.m., the center of Tropical Storm Kirk is located near latitude 13.5 degrees north, longitude 34.8 degrees west. Kirk is moving at the west near 12 miles per hour. Satellite wind data indicates that maximum sustained winds are at 50 miles per hour. They've increased to 50 miles per hour this morning with higher gusts. Kirk is likely to become a hurricane by tomorrow and could be a major hurricane by midweek. Tropical storm force winds extend outward 115 miles from the center. The estimated minimum central pressure has fallen to 1,001 millibars. And rating the discussion very quickly, let's go ahead and dive right into this right here. The environment around Kirk appears quite favorable for strengthening during the next several days, with warm waters, a moist environment, and low shear in the forecast. Given the formation of an inner core and the rate of strengthening that has been raised in the short term, and rapid intensification is a distinct possibility. The biggest negative of this system is probably its large size, which could eventually promote eye wall replacement cycles and some sea surface temperature cooling ahead of the system. Still, almost all the guidance shows Kirk being quite a large and powerful hurricane. The new forecast lies between the dynamical model consensus and the statistical dynamical models, which are quite bullish on the system. They're having the maximum sustained winds peaking at 125 miles per hour as a major hurricane out in the Atlantic Ocean. I think we do have some ships models that we can go ahead and take a look at right here. Yes, here's the latest ships models that we have right here for you. Shout out to Galaxy for sending this in. But here's the ships forecast. We have right here, getting up to Category 4 intensity, 56% chance of a 25 knot increase in 24 hours, and a 50% probability of a 65 knot increase in the next 72 hours. And as you can see, there's low wind shear, there's plenty of moisture, there's plenty of water temperatures and ocean heat content to kind of for the system to work with. So yeah, this is one of those systems where we're going to have to pay attention to. The good news is this system is most likely going to stay out to sea. That's the good news with this. And the reason I say it's good news is this could be a very important case study, and this does appear to be the best chance we have at one of those case study hurricanes since Hurricane Sam of 2021, which got to a high-end Category 4 hurricane as a buzzsaw before undergoing an eye wall replacement cycle, re-strengthening up to 150 miles per hour, and then eventually weakening, staying out to sea. No one got hurt. No one got killed. That's the kind of thing we like to see with these kinds of hurricanes. I'm okay with powerful hurricanes as long as they stay out to sea and don't affect people. Now, of course, there are concerns with shipping and everything like that. There are some shipping concerns with Kirk going forward. I'm not denying that. But ultimately, this is going to stay out to sea, and I think that's the first piece of good news we have had for quite a while. Now, we have this area of interest right here, which I am a bit more intrigued with, mainly because the Bermuda High is going to, and the ridge is going to start building up as the system continues to move further to the west. And we've seen the chances on the system really surge in the last 48 hours. Here's the cliff notes. Showers and thunderstorms continue to increase in association with a tropical wave located a few hundred miles south of the Cabo Verde Islands. Upper level winds appear conducive for further development, and a tropical depression is very likely to form in a few days while the system moves slowly westward over the eastern tropical Atlantic. 50% chance of formation in the next 48 hours, 90% in the next 7 days. And the NHC, this is what they're saying right here. Tropical depression is very likely to form. That's a pretty interesting wording from them, and I'm curious to see how the system will eventually evolve. But regardless of that, it's stuff we're gonna have to pay attention to. And I've seen some long track models maybe having this close to the Lesser Antilles, and I'll get to those in a little bit. But ultimately, it's too early out to determine how exactly this system is going to go and if anyone is going to be affected. But we will still pay attention to it. Going back to the satellite imagery over here, here's Kirk over here. Let's route out here in the Atlantic Ocean. I'm gonna see if we can get a view in the eastern Atlantic. I don't think we exactly can. I really wish we could, but we can't. But we can see Kirk right there. We can see Joyce over here. We see the area of interest over here off the coast of Africa, and we see the area of interest over here off the coast of Nicaragua right there. And just out of curiosity, I do want to pull up some water vapor imagery. We're going to start the upper levels and then work our way down. So that's what we're looking at in terms of water vapor. Ultimately, some very moist air in the upper levels that I'm noticing right here, especially around Kirk, where you're seeing this massive amount of outflow really blowing up and really ramping up in intensity right there. That outflow is looking really beautiful for a relatively strong tropical storm, I will say, right there. So we're going to have to pay very close attention to it. Going down to the mid-levels just to see where the dry air is. Looking back at it, in terms of where Kirk is, there's not much dry air going on around it. There is a little bit of dry air that's kind of caught into the outflow, but due to the low wind shear in the region, it's going to stay relatively low. And it's going to stay relatively low in terms of risk of penetrating into the inner core of it that is developing at this current point. But ultimately, that's stuff we're going to have to pay attention to. Also, watching the dry air in the western Atlantic Ocean to see if this may be will affect tropical development. There is a little bit of dry air kind of getting into the Caribbean Sea. I am paying attention to that, at least in the mid-levels right here. That might slow down any kind of development going on, and as models have been kind of trending weaker and weaker with this, the chances for the national hurricane, for the system to strengthen and develop are continuing to decrease just a little bit. It's a bit of a shift, but we'll have to pay attention to the trends going forward, and we'll have to pay attention to this patch of dry air going to the lower levels, because this is a rather important area. Yes, there is some drier air going on right here across much of the Caribbean, across much of the Atlantic right here. But we are noticing some moist air going on in the Western Caribbean. We're seeing plenty of convection ramping up, plenty of convection building up all over the place. It might slow down development if that dry air kind of prevents the system from going on the lower levels. But if you take a look at Kirk, you're seeing no such slowing down. All this is right here is we're seeing a stacked environment in terms of moisture from the lower levels to the mid levels to the upper levels, and Kirk is ready to go in terms of development, in terms of quick strengthening. So let's go ahead and pull up the current storm information for Tropical Storm Kirk. Okay, the Tropical Tidbits website has actually updated since we started recording this. Now they're going at 50 knots or 60 miles per hour, and I believe the NHC is going to go with that in the next advisory, pressure of 999 millibars. We're going to have to pay a close attention to that, because if this system gets up to near hurricane strength by tonight, then it's go time, and then the system is really going to start taking off down the road. Let's go ahead and pull up the track models and the intensity. Track models, let's go ahead, as you can see, generally to the west and west-northwest in the next 24 hours. That moves a bit more northwest in the next 48, 72, and 96 hours going forward. And then you have the system mainly staying out to sea for going forward after that. So that's generally some very good news that we're paying attention to. Intensity runs have been very interesting. Here's the 18Z intensity runs. The majority of the intensity runs keep it around major hurricane strength, around Category 3, Category 4 intensity, but I do want to pull up the 12Z runs, because this was pretty interesting. Majority of them got up to Category 3 and 4 strength, but the HMON really wanted Kirk to get up to Category 5 intensity, and we're going to have to pay attention to that, because that is not, in my opinion, not off the cards just yet, mainly because it's out to sea, there's no wind shear, there's plenty of warm water, and there's decent amounts of OHC for that to continue and for that to go on. So that's what we're going to be paying attention to. Let's go ahead and pay attention to the conditions next. Here's the conditions that we have going forward. Let's go ahead and start with the Caribbean system, because that potentially poses the greatest threat to land. In terms of the Caribbean system and the system off the Central American Gyre, water temperatures of 30 plus degrees Celsius going on across much of the Caribbean Sea, as well as in the southern half of the Gulf of Mexico, where the area of interest is expected to wobble into. Ultimately, if you took water temperatures at face value, you would ultimately go, okay, this system has a pretty high likelihood to develop. Why is this system not going on? Well, there's other factors too. Don't get me wrong. You have to keep that in mind. There's other factors too, including ocean heat content, dry air, and wind shear, which we will get to in just a second. But ultimately, if you take a look at this very surface levels, very conducive for tropical development. In terms of Kirk, very conducive for tropical development based on sea surface temperatures alone. Let's go ahead and go to the ocean heat content. Let's get an updated map for that just very quickly, September 30th. Let's go ahead and pull up the ocean heat content map. OHC, pretty interesting. In the Caribbean Sea, a lot higher. We're still seeing over 200 OHC in several areas across much of the Caribbean Sea and in the loop current of the Gulf of Mexico right there, where the system is at. It's off the coast of Nicaragua as it approaches the Caribbean. It's going to be in an area of at least 150 OHC, so we're going to have to pay attention to that. Kirk is going to be a situation where it's currently over around 50 to 60 OHC right now, which is good for conducive strengthening, and that is what Kirk is doing right now. But regardless of that, it's going to be moving in an area of around, I'd say, 75, 80, 90, even 100 OHC, and then you're going to start seeing the system start to rapidly escalate, rapidly intensify as the system continues to move through. And then the system right afterward is going to be entering an area of around 25 to 50 OHC and rapidly escalating from there on out. And if it moves further and further to the west, it's going to be entering an area of 100 to 125 OHC as it approaches the Lesser Antilles. So obviously we're going to have to keep close tabs on that, because if it does meander that far to the west, it has a much higher chance of strengthening at a very quick rate, and we can go ahead and show you that in just a second. Let's go ahead and pull up the wind shear map. Wind shear in parts of the Caribbean Sea, relatively high, especially in the eastern portion of the western Caribbean Sea, but we're going to have to pay attention to it. Where Kirk is, it's in a pocket of low wind shear. Where the system after that is, it's in a pocket of low wind shear. So we're going to have to pay attention to that. Wind shear, I'm noticing at its peak is around 40 knots near Cuba and Haiti at this current point. That wind shear is expected to regress a little bit and move out of the way. Mainly, the only thing I can see stopping this system from developing is dry air, and we're going to have to pay close attention to that going forward. Regardless of that, let's go ahead and show you some forecast runs. Very quickly, we're going to show you some operational runs. We're going to show you the GFS and CMC as well as the Euro runs for the operational runs. And then I want to dive into the hurricane runs for Kirk, mainly because I'm paying very close attention to this. I'm taking this very seriously. And here's the situation we have with the GFS. GFS wants this Caribbean system to organize and develop. Matter of fact, I'm going to move to the Western Caribbean over here, the Western Atlantic, has it briefly developing and then remains a remnant low, then gets up to potentially tropical storm strength before making landfall in the Gulf Coast right here as a tropical storm. So we're going to have to pay attention to that. I'm not a massive fan of the track of it. We're going to have to pay attention to that. Here's what we have going on with the CMC right here. CMC has been pretty interesting, or has it really not doing much until it gets to the Gulf of Mexico, and then enters Florida as a tropical storm. It's been relatively inconsistent in terms of the intensity and in terms of the track, so we'll have to pay attention to that. And I still think this has a possibility to develop, but this inconsistency needs to get its act together. Otherwise, this probably won't develop, which would be some really good news, especially for the Gulf Coast. European run, let's go ahead and pull that up. And let's go ahead and take a look at this. European actually does not have the system really developing, at least until about 7 days out or so, where it impacts Florida as a tropical storm. That is kind of curious, and I want to pay attention to that. But that is some good news if we're seeing weaker and weaker trends, and we see less and less of this development possibility. Let's go ahead and look at Kirk now. Let's start with the HMON run over here. HMON has the system really starting to ramp up. We showed you the 12Z forecast earlier, and I want to go ahead and get the main sea level pressure and 10 meter heights going on. The HMON has the system organizing, quickly developing, and ramping up in intensity, gets up to Category 1, Category 2, Category 3, and then Category 4 eventually down the road. We're down to up to a 948 millibar system, undergoes an eyewall replacement cycle, then the system starts to intensify a little bit more, and then you have a Category 3 to 4 scenario as a 950 millibar large hurricane. So ultimately starts off relatively strong, then I believe it undergoes an eyewall replacement cycle, and then starts to strengthen once again. That's the HMON for you. Halves A has been pretty interesting. That's Isaac. I do apologize for that. Let's go ahead and pull back up to Kirk. Here's Halves A that we have right here. Really organizing, developing, ramping up in intensity. Right here, gets up to Category 3 or Category 4 in strength with a pressure of 945 millibars. That's a very strong hurricane out in the Atlantic. Pressure bottoms out at 941, so that's going to be something to watch and keep a very close eye on. Halves B run, let's go ahead and show that. Pressure bottoms out at 932 millibars, 931, around 927, excuse me, around right there is a Category 4, Category 5 hurricane. As this system moves on, it's more likely going to be a Cat 4 due to the size of Kirk at that current point, but regardless of that, rapidly intensifies in the next 72 to 96 hours, and then it really starts to expand in size due to an eyewall replacement cycle. So that's the Halves B run. Last run we'll show you is the H-Wharf. H-Wharf has the system really ramping up in intensity, undergoes an eyewall replacement cycle, remains a very large system as a Cat 3 or Cat 4. So that's just stuff we're going to have to pay attention to going forward, and we will continue to update you not just on this, but in terms of the area of interest behind that here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. So before I go, I do want to say I'm really excited, ladies and gentlemen, for the MLB postseason to really start. It starts tomorrow at around 1 o'clock my time. I'm really stoked. I'm really excited for it. I'm as you can tell with the hats, that's why I'm wearing it today. Rooting for the Astros to make it through the postseason. But I will tell you this: they are facing the Detroit Tigers, and if the Tigers end up beating Houston, I will be rooting for them because they haven't made the postseason in the last 10 years, and I am rooting for them all the way. One of those two teams I'm really excited for. So, yeah, I might do these little rants towards the end of the video just to see what you guys think. So, I hope you guys don't mind that. But if you don't, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps us out, helps us get more people engaged with weather. The goal of this channel, as always, is to get more people engaged. If you want to come hang out with us at Storms United, be sure to join our Discord server. The link is in the end screen. Also, shout out to Daniel as an official sponsor of the Pat's Path Predictor Patreon. If you want to be an official sponsor and support the channel more directly, be sure to join it. It's in the first link in the description down below. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.